What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to my channel. Today we're talking about a newer release, Dashcam. Before we begin, let me know in the comments what your thoughts on this movie were, if you already saw it or if you were planning on seeing it, and make sure to hit that thumbs up button if you like these reviews, as it helps me out immensely by getting my content out there. And if you're new here, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button so you can stay up to date with more movie related content like horror reviews on a near daily basis. But let's not waste any more time and let's talk about Dashcam. This sees two friends embark on a horror-fueled road trip and livestream the most terrifying night of their lives. This is directed by Rob Savage, who previously helmed one of the only really good pandemic-centered movies, Host, in 2020, and it hit theaters and VOD early in June after a festival run in 2021. Though unlike Host, which was mostly beloved by all, reception towards this was considerably more polarizing. And I try not to just throw that word around when it comes to movies, but I mean, it really goes in one extreme or the other. I've seen countless people either declaring this one of the most terrifying movies of the year or one of the absolute worst movies of the year, which shocked me considering how well done Host was and how it seemed Savage was this filmmaker to be on the lookout for within the horror genre. Though, when you get through even just 5 minutes of this movie, it's not hard to see where that's coming from. Now, truthfully, I didn't really know what to expect walking into this, as I didn't look too much into the plot synopsis. The only thing that came to mind, given the title and the fact that Host touch upon real-world events, as that took place in the middle of the pandemic, that this might be more of the same, and a much more serious venture than what we ultimately got. What I wasn't expecting was a surprisingly more comedic tone, though I'd refrain from calling this a straight-up horror comedy, and that our lead character, who I'm going to refrain from calling our protagonist, is as unlikable as she is here. Musician Annie Hardy plays an exaggerated version of herself, being this freestyle rap live streamer who also happens to be an obnoxious anti-vaxxer who's rude and repeatedly insults others and gets into arguments with everyone over politics or even just about every little thing. Like Savage's previous film, this takes place at the height of the COVID lockdowns, and that winds up playing a crucial role in finding out what kind of person Annie is and how she winds up where she is within the movie, as she's an American escaping to London so she can avoid the lockdown. Now, while Hardy seemed like she was having an absolute blast with this role, the thing is, if you can't get past how truly grating she can be through the majority of the film, then it's really going to be difficult to enjoy much else about it. And believe me when I say, I can totally understand there. With the film using a found footage style, all taking place through her live streams, that means she's in literally every single scene in the movie, and her excessive, annoying, unlikable personality is very much a domineering force throughout the movie, where she's constantly making rude comments, saying offensive things, or coming up with crass insults, even during moments where it's absolutely pure terror for her. And I wish I could say I was exaggerating, but it is constant. Like, it truly is almost every other line. Now, admittedly, for me, it got to be a little too much at times. While there are some really fun, inventive names that Hardy comes up with throughout this as a way to break up some of the tension once the horror elements kick in, it's still so frequent with the rate these come through. Nearly every other line, as I said. And in some ways, it makes sense because it's the personality of the character, but there were a few times I kind of wanted it scaled back a bit. I kind of rolled my eyes at a few of the insults where it felt like a clear stretch. I imagine she improvised a lot of her insults here, and there were times it felt like she was grasping for straws with what to come up with. And this is on top of the fact that you just can't root for her. Now, it's a risky move to make your film center around a protagonist who's absolutely detestable the way this does. It's generally one of the big rules when it comes to filmmaking, is you need to have compelling characters who you can root for and be invested in, and this does the total opposite of that. Like, while Hardy offers comedic relief, there wasn't ever a moment where I was actively rooting for her, nor does she really get this compelling arc. She remains pretty much the exact same way throughout the entire movie, especially as the whole point wasn't really about having this life-changing experience or anything. So yeah, when it comes to one of the big rules of filmmaking in general, this breaks all that. So if you can't get on board with that, you're gonna hate this, and honestly, I can totally get where you're coming from. But now the funny thing is, that's really the only major criticism there is for this movie, at least for me personally. Now, it's a big one, don't get me wrong there, and it can be enough to turn you off from this movie altogether. I totally understand. But regarding everything else, the thing is, like Host, it's once again really well done. As I said at the top of this review, it seemed like with Host, Rob Savage would be one of those filmmakers to be on the lookout for in the horror genre. And when it comes to crafting the horror elements here, that once again appears to be the case, because this movie gets absolutely bonkers, and I have to commend the style on display here from Savage, whose projects I will gladly keep tuning in for. Now, while the first part of this film goes on like normal, just following around Annie's fairly grating exploits as she drives around London, livestream rapping and insulting others, things take a turn when she picks up this frail old woman named Angela and offers to drive her home. Because once she picks her up, this movie cranks things up to an 11, where Hardy is subjected to more or less an all-out assault non-stop for the next 45 minutes or so, which, by the way, was another positive for this movie, as it only clocks in at about 75 minutes and doesn't overstay its welcome. But once the attacks begin, that's where the film becomes really entertaining, and it also becomes the one reason why some might say it's okay to have a character as unlikable as Annie here, because most of this movie is almost like seeing her get her comeuppance for 45 minutes straight. If you're able to get past all those annoying names she says and that grating personality, it actually becomes quite entertaining seeing this really annoying person get put through the ringer non-stop. The movie just becomes an all-out assault on your senses, with Annie getting chased on foot, shot at, her car gets sent into a lake. There's also a major supernatural element that plays into all this as well that makes the chase even more riveting, and I don't know if I necessarily call a lot of it scary, but at the very least, it was very entertaining. And what helps too is the style Savage was going for. I've always had a big soft spot for found footage movies, or this new technique where most of the movie takes place on a computer screen. Because while all movies are meant to include this suspension of disbelief element and make you believe just for a moment that it's supposed to feel real, I think given the nature of this technique, where it's literally supposed to feel completely real, there's something inherently immersive about the whole thing, and for that, I've always had an easy time buying into these films. And this is another one that's no exception to that. Like, the way it's all presented, I thought Savage did a great job of making it feel real. I especially like the inclusion of a live chat that plays all throughout the movie, where we see all of Annie's followers making these really funny comments as she gets attacked. If there's one big reason I'd want to go back and rewatch the movie, it's just to specifically pay attention to the chat and nothing else, because some of the comments were pretty funny. And because of that presentation, it made the non-stop all-out assault on your sense style that Savage goes for here to work fine for me. It won't be the case for everyone, as I know found footage movies were one of those styles that I think people grew a bit tired of, but I was fine with it. And I think had Savage gone for that approach with a movie presented in a traditional setup, it wouldn't have worked so well, and that would have definitely made it feel even more grating. And don't get me wrong, when the film is as loud and in your face as this can be at times, on top of the fact that in between all this, you have Hardy just throwing out non-stop insults here, like, I can see why people were saying they didn't like this, or even hated this. There were a couple of times I thought I was going to wind up in that crowd. But at the end of the day, I ultimately liked the approach, and despite the fact that I did get a little annoyed here and there, and I still did not like Hardy's character overall, I found myself enjoying it. Now, don't get me wrong, it's very one-note, nor does it have any real compelling character development, and it's not destined to be some new horror classic. But for what it was, it worked for me as a fun B-movie. Dashcam is going to be a very love it or hate it movie, and it's not hard to see why. On one hand, you have a very obnoxious, grating protagonist who doesn't have any sort of compelling character arc, and even as she stares death in the face numerous times, she doubles and triples down on some of her worst character aspects. And that will be enough to tank this entire movie for many people. But on the other, this also sees this character get put through the ringer and get her comeuppance repeatedly, and the very in-your-face style Rob Savage uses to express that is very entertaining, even if maybe not always scary. And while that doesn't fully forgive having someone you can't actively root for at the front and center here, I can at least see where he's coming from in that regard. I don't quite fall on the side of loving it, but I ultimately enjoyed the film overall and found it to be a wild ride. So if you can get over its one very notable flaw, you might wind up enjoying this too. Dashcam gets a 7 out of 10. So let me know, did you see Dashcam, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like this as much as host? Do you think it was scary? Let me know in the comments below so we can discuss. Also, if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and share it. And for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching everyone, and keep having fun with film.